Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wyoming Connections, where we're connecting ideas that matter with people and communities across the state and nation. I'm Sean Reese. I'm the CEO of the Wyoming Humanities Council. We're one of 55 state and territorial humanities councils and Wyoming's affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Our job is to promote and support, understand, and protect the cultural landscape of Wyoming for the purpose of strengthening Wyoming's democracy. We do this not only by promoting civics and democracy, but also fostering lifelong learning, enhancing the creative economy, raising cultural awareness, and engaging communities. We've been serving Wyoming for over 50 years, including almost a decade from an office in the Jackson Center for the Arts under the direction of Emmy DeGrappa. We're very grateful to the center for hosting this event. Our organization is proud to bring you this panel discussion about the forthcoming film, Home from School. Through our American Indian Culture and Education Initiative, we helped the film company, Caldera Productions, develop this important documentary. Over the last 4 years, with generous support from a foundation that wishes to remain anonymous, we have invested in many projects that support Native Americans in efforts to tell their important stories and protect their heritage. Caldera Productions is a Wyoming-based documentary film company founded in 2015. Their founder, Geoff, is a well-known writer and filmmaker who has created some of our state's most important documentaries of Wyoming's heritage, history, and culture. I've had the pleasure of working with Geoff in the past as he and others have worked to improve their community of land or Wyoming. Geoff is also a subject of our latest award-winning podcast, What's Your Why, which you can find on your preferred podcast platform or on our website, thinkwhy.org. Geoff will moderate today's panel, and without further ado, please welcome Geoff. Thank you, Geoff.
Thank you, Sean. I think I remember to unmute for a change. I'm glad to be here. I am the producer of the documentary Home from School that you're going to see part of today. It's the story of a quest by members of the Northern Arapaho tribe to retrieve the remains of 3 boys from the tribe who had been shipped off late in the 19th century to the Carlisle Indian Industrial School from their home on the Wind River Reservation. That's about a 2,000-mile trip. They were to die at that school and were buried there in 1882 and 1883. Now, I don't think you're really here to listen to me. We've got some folks on a panel today who really experienced what this film is about. So we're going to show you an excerpt of about 17 minutes from the film, then bring that panel on to talk about the experience, talk about the history that we're looking at here. They've been involved in this a lot longer than we've been working on the film. And they are Yufna Soldier Wolf, Crystal Seabearing, and the new chairman of the Northern Arapaho Business Council, Jordan Dresser. We'll meet them more in depth after we've seen this excerpt. So let's have a look and then we'll talk.
When they brought these children here, they took everything away from them.
I imagined them scared, hungry, just trying to understand what was happening.
In Arapaho, we have our own way of life. We live under this pipe, and it's teaching.
They tried everything to get rid of us. They resorted to taking our children.
Native Americans, we're gone. We don't exist anymore in this nation. We exist only in books, on TV, in museums.
The children were much more vulnerable to all the European diseases.
When one died, and then the next one died, and they all died within a year of each other, They needed each other.
They're buried here, see. They've been here too long. It's time for them to go home. Anxious, but at the same time, I don't know. I don't know. The unknowns over there, you know. That's what I'm thinking about, but I'm ready.
We don't know where we're gonna find it all. And like, I think we should just like stay humble and not think about, or like not get too excited.
And I always tell the kids it's okay to cry. You know? I'm excited and I'm anxious. I'm anxious for us to go over there and to get our children and bring them home. That's kind of how I'm feeling right now. I'm happy. It's just I'm ready for this.
The school was founded by Richard Henry Pratt in 1879. He developed his philosophy of an institution that would train Indian children to become assimilated exclusively in a white community, with industrial training for half a day and academic training for the other half day. So the first thing he did was cut their hair, remove their clothing, and replace it with uniforms.
When I first got here, I walked in that cemetery, and then I could feel the pain and that heavy heart.
A lot of these headstones don't have names. Those are kids that are never gonna go home.
How many students came to Carlisle?
We know of 10,700 names.
I want everybody to know what happened to our children in those boarding schools. Wherever they were, there was over 500 boarding schools in the United States.
We have letters from my grandpa who wrote here, and my dad who wrote here, and my uncle who wrote here, requesting for our children back.
It is the first time, the very first time, that any of the native nations have succeeded taking ownership of this history and taking ownership of their students that they lost and taking them home again.
We're not waiting no longer for anybody to come save us. We're gonna save ourselves.
We still rehashing this. Why can't we be focusing on science, math, engineering? You know, there's so many other things that we could be focusing on, but we can't do that until this has been, we've healed from it.
They go home.
Well, hello, I'm Geoff O'Gara. We met earlier. I'm going to introduce you very quickly to the panel that we've got today. These are folks who are participants in the story that you've just seen a portion of, part of the documentary Home from School. First, we have Yufna Soldier Wolf. She's a member of the Northern Arapaho Nation on the Wind River Reservation. She was formerly director of the Northern Arapaho Tribal Historic Preservation Office, and she is the great-granddaughter of the Northern Arapaho's last war chief, Sharpnose, and her great-grandmother, Sweetgrass. Hello, Yufna. Welcome. We also have Crystal Seabury. She is the deputy director of the Northern Arapaho Tribal Historic Preservation Office. She has degrees from the University of Wyoming in history, American Indian Studies, and environment and natural resources, and she is an enrolled member of the Northern Arapaho tribe. Welcome, Crystal. And then we have Chairman Jordan Dresser. He's a documentary film producer and the chairman the new chairman of the Northern Arapaho Business Council on the Wind River Reservation. He is a producer on Home from School, but has earlier credits also on the documentary What Was Ours, and he is at work now on a new production about missing Indigenous women. Jordan, good to have you here. So right up front, I better do something I will forget to do if I put it off till later, and that is to thank the Humanities Council for putting this on and for the other groups that helped us make the film. Those include the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund, the Wind River Foundation, and Vision Maker Media. Now, let's get right into some of the questions that are raised and some of the things that we'll get into further in the documentary when we complete it. It's nearly done. First of all, the creation of the boarding schools back in the 19th century. I mean, at first glance, some could make the argument that this was maybe a positive, benign effort by the federal government and often Christian churches to bring education to Native American communities as they began adjusting to this new and largely European nation and culture. But it was, in fact, something quite different. So let's start by talking about what these schools were really about and the impact they had on Native Americans then and now. And Jordan, can we begin with you? It's the unmuting process.
Okay, yeah, I know. Thank you all. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this project, to you, Geoff, and also to Yufna, Crystal, and everybody who's been doing great work with all this project. I've been working on different, I'm now the chairman of the tribe. And so I'm just working on different projects that relate to sovereignty. And I think what I love about this film so much is that it opens up the door about, accountability. And to me, that's a big thing, not only in country, but also across the nation that we're seeing. Accountability is a big thing. And to me, I feel like my platform and the next film I'm working on speaks to that, which is the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women one. And it just speaks about how to be accountable and what it means to a community and what it can do for a community. I think it opens up the door to healing, which is really important for us. And that's why I've been so honored to be a part of this project.
Yufna, do you want to add to that?
I'm Yufna Soldier Wolf. I think what Jordan said is really important. And I think overall, what he said is healing. What it comes down to is actually healing. Seeing tribal communities heal in a way that we weren't able to do in the past 140 years, I think is finally, we're at that point. And I'm hoping that we can go forward and continue that through various other media ways.
Well, certainly one of the reasons that I became interested in this story is that it seemed to have not been told. In other words, I didn't learn about it in public schools when I went to school or in college when I took a lot of American history. And I guess I would ask that of you, and Crystal, maybe you could answer. What do students today learn about this? Do they learn about it even in schools on the reservations?
Good morning. My name is Crystal, and it's good to be here, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel. Well, first of all, like you, Geoff, when I was in school on the reservation, there was little discussion about boarding schools. Even on reservation schools, there wasn't much education that was taught about what happened to us, and even at that, because of the trauma, the historical trauma and intergenerational trauma that has happened, it was really hard for our grandparents to discuss it with us, and so in the community as well. And so it was very hidden. And it wasn't until I went to college that I started learning about all of this and getting more in depth into it. And then Yufna's journey, with her fighting, to be heard, that it really piqued my interest, and I wanted to support her as much as I could. And that now today I feel with the Indian Education for All Act that has happened, that this is a good opportunity and the time for us to organize and get together and tell our narrative and get it out there to the community with things like this, because not only does our community need to heal, but so does the the communities near the reservation, because it trickles on out to the reservation with the trauma and the effects of trauma. And so it's good, for everybody to get on this healing process and to educate, for everybody, and get on that path to healing, so we'll be better in the future.
Thank you. So we watched a portion of the documentary, and a lot of it was some of the history of boarding schools, at least the preliminary description of the dilemma that was faced by the tribe in looking for these 3 children that had been essentially lost or left at the Carlisle school. But so three boys died in 1882 and 1883. This is some 140 years later, and you set off on a mission to retrieve their remains, bring them back to Wind River. I guess I'd ask you, Yufna, what inspired you and kept you going? This is a long quest.
I think out of the 140 years, I've only lived the 35-ish years of that. And growing up, I listened to those stories of, the traumatic history and stories that Crystal kind of hit upon, was that, every time we go visit with various relatives, that's one thing that would always come up was what happened at boarding school. And it was generational, it was passed down. The trauma was also passed down, but so was the history. And so were the important stories that went with that. And one thing that we carried as a family was, don't forget, Little Chief is still there. And so that through oral histories and stories, it was passed down that he's still there, don't forget him. And so growing up, I grew up thinking, why didn't anybody go after him? Why are we still here? Learning my history, learning the nation's history, I realized that we weren't at that point, and we're still kind of there at a nation's perspective of trying to heal as a nation, and to even acknowledge that this happened as a nation. And so kind of to answer that question would be, we're still trying to get these stories out there, and I think that's what this film does.
To follow up a little bit on that, I mean, again, all these years later, since this happened, you seem, things really began to move in 2017 and 2018. And I guess, what happened? How did you break through?
I think I actually gave up, and then had to get back up and go again. And then I gave up, and then we had to get up and go again. And if it weren't for the elders and the Arapaho people's strength to keep, young people going, I think it would have probably never happened, because I always tell people, if you see me, see the people behind me, see my elders, see the workers, see the people that pushed us to get us to that point, because it wasn't easy, and I'm actually still healing from all of that, because even that whole repatriation was huge. It's so intertwined into civil rights, repatriation, just being heard at a national level. All of these things just balled up into one thing that, there's times it's so huge, you do give up, and you do feel like I failed, I'm gonna take a break, and then we'll go again. And so it was 140 years of various families and various generations who kept it on like a baton, as you could say that, and just kept it on and kept it going to the point where it was finally, I actually wrote a letter to them. They said no. I put it away. It came back, and I was like, I think we're ready. And when we did, I actually just put a word in the newspaper, and people came. People were interested. The Rosebud Sioux tribe, the youth, they were like, we're interested. And I was like, this is bigger than I thought. It's other tribes that want their children back. And so, like I said, it was just generational. It was giving up. It was going again. Having that determination was really important. So in the end, we did give up. We did fail at times, but we got up and we went again. And we wouldn't have been able to do that without our tribe as a whole, our youth, our elders, our people who helped us to get that far. I mean, it's still a huge burden that we carry through, trauma in these stories, but, there's always good things that do come out of it.
So, and this really entailed a delegation of elders and youth going back to Carlisle, going back to Pennsylvania, in a sense, going back on the route that those young children had to travel by train without their parents, without others in the past. But I want to hear, and I know you're going to tell us in the film as well, what that experience was like. Jordan, you were part of that delegation. What was it like going back to Carlisle?
I gotta keep remembering to unmute. Carlisle is a really heavy place energy-wise. You know, the first time we went there, like, remember it was raining. It was just like a downpour, so it was just kind of, you know, setting the tone. And the weather cleared up as we went along, and it's just a really heavy place. And the thing about that blew my mind is that, you know, I mean, it's an active military base, but there's the fact that, like, a lot of the people there don't know the whole history of it and kind of what transpired. And you know, the cemetery is basically in this corner on this busy street. So it's not like it's like in the middle of it and it's just this serene, beautiful place, you know, with butterflies and sunshine and rainbows. You know, it's there just on a corner, you know. And it just was like, it didn't feel respectful. It didn't feel honoring. It didn't feel any of those things. It just felt sad to me. And to me, it was just the urgency even more about that we needed to do something to bring these kids back, you know. And I just admire the strength of Yufna and all the elders who were there, because it was, and the youth, you know, because mentally, you know, there's moments where I had to like just decompress and take a moment. But I admire all of them for being able to navigate all that.
And Yufna, I remember some of the letters you got from the Army, and they would say things like, oh, this place is so beautiful, and tourists love it, and, you know, we think it honors Native Americans. I mean, that's what you were up against.
Yeah, it was. And it was that stereotype that I think Native Americans live with through history, that we've been taught that this is who we are. We're kept in museums. We're a different species, you know, we're subhuman, we're primitive, we're the noble savage, to, oh, this is how we honor you. And it was really hard to accept that, because growing up, that's not who I knew we were. You know, I know we were proud Arapaho people with a language. So to be able to go through there and experience it, like Jordan said, it was surreal. It was really sad, especially when you first walk into the cemetery. It was, you realize how small it actually is.
And you went through all this and dealt with all the impediments that you had. And there you were trying to retrieve the remains of these three children. And in the end, they got one of the graves wrong. They got the wrong child. And so you were forced to come back with only two of the children. And I'm giving away some of the story we're telling in the documentary, but it's really important. And again, you guys never quit. There was another trip back a year later. Crystal, you were on that trip. Tell me a little bit about what that was like for you.
Just to echo off of what they said, is like, when I first got there, you know, it was a really sad feeling, and it was a really sad energy. And there's these little graves that you see just on the corner there, where people come in and, you know, in and out, and then it just felt like they were forgotten, even though they're just right in the middle of this busy intersection. But to me, it just felt like they were forgotten, or they were overlooked, or they weren't as important, because they were just little Native children, you know. And to me, I just felt so sad for them, for all of them that were there. And it was just quite an experience. And like I said, with the second delegation that went, you know, it was just pretty much the people from our office and then a couple of the family members. And it wasn't necessarily the elders, you know, the first trip, and you know, and the things they had to deal with. And I just imagine, I can't imagine like the elders and how they felt and what they went through. You know, it's really tough. It was really heartbreaking to see the disregard, I guess, of our Native children, you know. And that's how it felt to me. Like we were the only ones in that whole entire place that cared about them, you know. And it felt like, you know, I just wanted to get them out of there. I want to take all of them and get them out of there because, they're loved, they were loved, and I just wanted to show that respect. And it was tough. It was really tough. And, and we did a lot of praying and sticking together and talking and just trying to fight the best fight that we could for those children, and there were some obstacles in the way with the Army, and we just continued to push and get our relative home. So, in the end, it was done. But, it was a tough journey, and, Jordan and Yufna went twice, and I just, for me, just that one trip was enough. That's all I could handle. But, it was done. And like she said, we had prayers behind us. We had elders behind us. We had our community behind us that really helped us stay strong in those difficult times.
And Jordan really, had several jobs going on at once on these trips. He came back working as a producer on the film, as well as being part of the delegation to retrieve remains. And I guess it's worth asking, the privilege of being able to accompany you on this while you're living this story. Jordan, as a topic for a documentary, how does this happen? How do you see this becoming a documentary?
I think the thing about documentary work is that you have to find a story that's like has multiple layers to it and multiple characters to it, and very timely. And I just feel like the stars aligned for this project. And it's quick. Like we would hear things, and then like I just remember the first time with the trip, it was like next week we're gonna go, and I was like boom, and so there were so many different layers to it, and it talked about and there's also different overarching themes to it. Like I said, there's accountability, there's suspicion, and how different people were suspicious of kind of what was going to happen, go on, and then there's perseverance, and Yufna really pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and in the end, there's in a sense, it opens the door for a closure, it opens it up. And to me, that's a key thing. And I look at this project and I'm just really honored because we captured so many elders who've passed on, and we captured their knowledge and we got them, and that's the powerful thing, is that in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years from now, people could view this and they could, it's like they're coming back to life to tell their story. And that's really powerful. And it's just, and I feel like so many people can relate to these things that are going on, especially now in our country where, in a sense, this is going on at the border right now as we speak, so people can draw these parallels, and it's like, well, history, unfortunately, sometimes repeats itself.
It's interesting. You mentioned the elders, and of course, I think it takes an enormous amount of I don't know, just intelligence and forbearance to allow a crew like ours to kind of come and be with you during what's a very personal experience. Yufna, I think your family and I have had this before. We went to the Olympics in Salt Lake once together, but still, you had to help the elders find their way to doing it this way and participating in a documentary, which they certainly did. Tell me a little bit about that.
That was very interesting. So the Army actually hired their own anthropologists to kind of deal with us. And so we would kind of all have a conference call and talk with them. The Army would call and have questions. We wouldn't answer them then. We would wait for the elders to have a say and then call them back the next week. So it was really being that liaison in a ways, but at the same time, making sure they understood, when I say they, the Army and Carlisle, is that they understood what we were asking and what we're needing to do ceremoniously wise, or what type of protocols, because the elders, most of them were veterans, so they all have different protocols they all have to follow, and trying to pull that together was huge. There's times when we did get to Carlisle, when I had the Army like knocking on my door when I'm like almost ready to go to sleep, and I'd have to get up and be like, okay, figure it out. Going to the airport with the elders with the stuff that TSA, was okay or not okay with, I had to deal with ahead of time, getting them on the airplanes, making sure they're okay, getting there, feeding them and the youth. It was a job, but it was also great. I mean, to see them interacting and experiencing that was something they look forward to maybe most of their whole lives to do, to finally do this and see it happening. Gave them a closure and in a way, a healing. So I think it was really important to go through that experience. And after, we were able to tell the other tribes, this is what we went through. And it also set a precedence, like Jordan was saying, set a precedence of this, okay, this tribe did it, that we can do that with other tribes. So in the end, it was a great experience. And having the elders and the youth there just made it, for me, a whole lot more comfortable and homely, because if I needed a shoulder to cry on, there was somebody there to help me. So it was great. Yeah.
Just one little kind of inside baseball thing with Jordan, who's an experienced producer. One of the elements of the film that is noticeable is that we don't have a narrator. There's no Ken Burns God voice talking in the background about this. And there are real reasons for doing that, even though it makes it very hard to make the film. Jordan, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Sometimes a narrator would be like, this is what happened and this is what went on. But I feel like this story is so character driven that it's like, it moves the story along. And, when you're in the middle of you kind of don't piece together things as you go, and you see how things can be, the stories coming to light in a sense, but I mean, there's certain things that, I'm grateful that we captured, and to be part of this was a big thing. But also it's like the little things, like working with Yufna. Like I always think about that first time when we're going through the airport and it was just me and her and like 7 elders, and we're trying to accommodate all of them. And like, it was late, we're trying to get them dinner and we're just like trying to be mindful. And I remember I bought like a big bag of Snickers candy, and like, some of them were trying to watch their sugar intake, but I was just like, here, have it, let's just get through this night. So those little things like that I'm really grateful for. And like, to me, like I said, this story is just really powerful, and I feel like a lot of people are really going to connect with it, and it's going to open up the door for a lot of things. And this already did, open up the door for repatriations for other tribes to go to Carlisle and get their, loved ones back. So I'm really grateful, and I'm just honored, and I'm happy to highlight these wonderful, beautiful people.
We've got questions coming in from viewers, and that is one of them actually that you just started to answer, Jordan, and I'm going to direct this to Yufna, and that is, other tribes are now stepping up. They've seen the example of the Northern Arapaho. There are many more children buried at Carlisle. Talk a little bit about that, how other tribes have responded to this.
So in the initial beginning, like I said, when we first started out, when I said I made this advertisement, and then in the little tiny Wind River News, it was just this little tiny thing of like, we're going to have this meeting. And then I was getting phone calls from other people outside the reservation. And I thought, wow, it didn't occur to me that other tribes wanted their children back. So the Rosebud Sioux came, their youth came. They've been a part of this. They were here during the reburial. There's the Blackfeet tribe. They were able to repatriate their son. And so other tribes have asked, and I've gone to different various roundtable discussion in Minnesota a year after, where there are other tribes who were interested and there were other tribes that weren't. And so it was kind of at the beginning, when we knew we were going to repatriate, I started realizing there's other tribes that have children there, but there are also other tribes that didn't want to bring their children home also.
So we're getting a number of questions about some details about that history at Carlisle, but I want to talk a little bit about where we are now, because I don't think that the story ends with the documentary and the reburial of the children that were brought back from Carlisle to Wind River. But I do want to talk a little bit, I'd like you to talk a little bit about the impact it has had so far. And Crystal, we might start with you. I mean, can we talk a little bit about the impact of the remains of these children returning and being reburied at Wind River, and the healing process that you want to undertake?
Oh yeah. So for this part of the healing process, I think what our office, can do is, and like I said, the Indian Education for All, but is actually going to our children and having that material to teach them. And this documentary will help with that. And to kind of get their questions going and how things came about, because it's a bigger picture when you look at it of how the history came with westward expansion and into where boarding schools came into play, because that was, just another tactic to get us to assimilate. And so it all connects. It all connects to treaties, to pre-contact, to westward expansion, to all of that assimilation efforts. And then, that's something that our office has, been working on to get that education out there, to have our children interested and to know who they are as their identity as an Arapaho person, and to be able to have that confidence to say, well, this has been going on for all these 140 years now, but I have the education and the mind to, and the perseverance to change that now, and I can change it for the future, and we're healing from it, and so we can move on, we can move forward, and we can bring our people up, and so that's kind of where we want to get today, and start working on that. And there when we did bring them back, there was just back and forth even with our own tribal members about, they had reservations about, bringing them home. And so, I listened to both sides, on that, and how, we shouldn't have went over there. But then when you start talking with them and you kind of explain the history, and the background of everything, and then they kind of understand, like, yeah, that this is part of our healing journey, it is, and it's really going to help, everything that is connected to that trauma that has been brought up to us, with all the alcohol and drug use and whatever, is that, it connects, and people are starting to see that, and and realizing, hey, we got to look at the past to get to the future. So,
and that, the impact within the Northern Arapaho tribe of this momentous event and events around the Carlisle repatriation is one thing. It's also a story that probably in part through the documentary is going to be reaching a lot of other people. We've had inquiries during this conversation we're having now from like a social studies teacher in Boston. So people really are attentive to it, probably very much in other indigenous communities, and also in what you might call the colonial community, the folks that are not of Native American ancestry. And Jordan, maybe you could talk a little bit about that impact beyond even the borders of the reservation or of reservations generally.
Well, I think it's the idea of showing that Native history is very complex and that it involves a lot of different places. I think that a lot of times they'll, they want us pegged to our reservation, and I think that's it. Like, that's all we've been, like Shoshone and Arapaho people, that Wyoming's it, and we haven't been anywhere else. But, we've had ties throughout everywhere, and it's like where we travel through and different places like that. But how we spread it out in different ways too. And I think that this just shows how history has been told from a certain perspective. And I think people are asking more questions, and they're saying, okay, well, I want to know the real history behind this. What happened at Carlisle? I think people hear the Jim Thorpe, who I love. But at the same time, there's a lot of different, it was good for him, but not so many other kids, and the reality is a lot of the kids died there. So those are the pieces of the history that we have to tell. And I think people are kind of waking up in a sense, and they're questioning the books that they have in front of them. And they're saying, well, I want to learn more. And that's the exciting thing about the age we live in today, especially with technology and social media. You have the connections and the ability to reach out to people and say, I want to learn more.
Yeah, and I might mention, since we hadn't gotten to that part of the documentary, that Jim Thorpe, the famous athlete, Olympic athlete, football player, just all-around athlete, was a student at Carlisle. I might incidentally mention there is a town called Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, which has his remains, and they have not been returned to the Sac and Fox tribe, which has asked for them. So these problems manifest in all kinds of other ways as well. I want to get to a slightly different subject. There are still federal boarding schools for Native American children. And they might be quite different from what Carlisle was a century ago, but I'd like to ask you all, if I could, and I'll start with Yufna, what purpose do they serve, if any?
I think boarding schools today in a contemporary perspective is really important because it shows that today we do need an education. We do need to know what we're up against, and we can't know those issues until we are able to read, write, and acknowledge and comprehend what issues are there. A lot of our kids are going off to boarding schools. I was never afforded that privilege. I did go to St. Stephen's Indian School, which used to be a boarding school. My parents went to school there also. My dad did go to Haskell, and a long time ago it was different. And education has changed so much that it's benefited us. A lot of our children and a lot of us here today have gone off to school, and we know that experience and that struggle, and we know what it feels like to be in two worlds, to be off at school and to experience that and not be home, and to really want to come home and quit. And we know what that feels like, and it's hard. It's so hard to juggle that. And so balance is key, but at the same time, boarding schools today is important because a lot of our children need that education.
I want to remind viewers that we are taking questions. I've been incorporating a few of them in the conversation we're having now, and we'll get to some more very shortly. A couple of other areas we want to cover as we get there, and it does include some of the elements of the questions that have come in. But please, by all means, I believe there's a message on the screen, or has been, telling you how to get your questions in, and we will get to them. I want to talk a little bit more broadly about repatriation. I want you to talk about it because, in fact, it's a lot more than just these remains at the Carlisle Indian School, as important as they are. The repatriation work that this tribe and many other tribes have to do is extensive and ongoing, and I don't know when that ever ends. Crystal, you're involved in that professionally now. You're doing it. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, how broad the repatriation effort really is?
Yeah, so our office has been dealing with repatriations, and the thing that people have to come to terms with is, like, back in the day there was, looting. They thought we were going to be extinct, so they tried to collect everything that they could from us and to study us, and then they would go give it to these museums and these people. And so that's how, a majority of the museums, their collections Native American, and it's so much. And then just getting to that point with NAGPRA is, we're now allowed to look at those inventories and to figure out, what is Arapaho? How are we going to get those back? And the disturbing part for me is just the human remains, and they're just sitting on shelves, and that they need to be laid to rest. There's certain protocols and things that need to be done, especially from a Northern Arapaho tribe, as a tribal member, or that, you do for them, and they're not afforded that opportunity because they're on the shelf somewhere in Chicago, in DC, and so our efforts, our main priority with the Tribal Historic Preservation Office is to look at those and try to repatriate those remains, and then hopefully one day when we do are allowed to get a cultural center, a museum, and a repository, that will be able to take our items back, our sacred objects, and have our elders decide on, how we're gonna handle those, and what we need to do, and to educate our children, because there was a lady in Chicago. Me and Yufna were on a tour in Chicago at the Film Museum, and we were talking about, we were there for repatriation, and she she basically said, oh, well, if you take these, the tribes take these back, what are we going to teach our kids? You know, and we were like, well, we need to teach our kids first about who they are, you know? And so it was eye-opening, I guess, to think that, you know, we have to prove, you know, that they're ours. We have to prove that without reason of the doubt that they belong to the Arapaho tribe. And we have to prove to these museums that, you know, we have enough evidence when they just in the past just got them. And then now we have to prove with law, you know, and evidence that they belong to the tribe. And to me, that just doesn't make sense. You know, if we say they're Arapaho, they're Arapaho, you know, and when we should know according to our elders, you know, traditional knowledge. And that's the frustrating part for me with all this repatriation efforts is the amount of effort we have to prove just to bring our relatives home and, you know, our loved ones home, and then also our, you know, the sacred objects. So.
And really, it's not just museums, although those are extensive. It's also private collectors, it's churches, it's, now Jordan and Yufna, both of you have been involved in the Historic Preservation Office as well, and in these efforts to repatriate artifacts and other things that really belong to the tribes historically. Do you have any stories you want to tell about that? Anything else you want to relate? There's a lot out there. I should always remember to call on somebody. I want you just to jump in, but one of you both, now you're both ready. Go for it.
I'll jump in. You know, Yufna has done a lot of repatriations, and Crystal, you know, so like I have a lot of respect for them because people don't realize how tough they are and draining. And, you know, you give a lot and you get something in return, which is their home, you know. But the thing that I think that Crystal talked about is that, like, you know, we're all younger. So when we go to these institutions, I feel like they look at us and they like don't take us as seriously. Like they're just like, oh, you guys are just these young little kids. Like, what are you guys doing here? You know? And it's like, well, we're not, you know, like just little meddling Scooby-Doo kids who are just, you know, it's like we know what we're doing, but also on top of that, we consult with the elders and whatnot. So we know what we're doing. And that's the thing that constantly happened to us. And to me, for me in the position now that I am, it's just like, I feel like we would be dismissed so many times that like, now it's like, well, I'm in a leadership role where I have the ability to be like, hey, you know, like I'm a council member, you know, and I'm the chairman now. It's like, please take us seriously. Please, these workers we have, take them seriously. They know what they're doing. And you just can't dismiss it and act like we're just like silly little kids. It's like, no, we know what we're doing. And we also know right from wrong. And it's the fact that, you know, no museum should have human remains. That's just wild to me, you know, but that's the reality of it. So there's certain places that like, we're just, you know, I feel like in my mind, we're just gearing up for like Chicago Field Museum. Like, you know, it's going to happen now. I feel like now it's going to happen.
Yufna, would you like to add to that?
Sure. I have so many stories. Kind of like what Jordan and Crystal had said was that Carlisle was one popular story because it related to everyone nationwide. But like kind of what Jordan had talked about is there's other repatriations we've done that we've, you know, had to go through and learn from and experience, and they're all really important. And at the same time, it's really hard to convey that to society and let alone our own people, because we've lost so much throughout these 140 years that it's come to the point of like, what are we going to preserve? What's so important to us that we need to keep for ourselves that's been taken away from us? And when we go out and ask for anything, like they had stated, you know, we get kind of like dismissed, like, who are you guys? What do you want? You know, we were doing fine until you wanted something back, and it was like, they belong to us, you know, whatever left should come back. And so kind of doing repatriations, like Jordan said, it kind of weighs you down. And for me, it really got to the point where I was like, I need to take a break. I need to recalibrate, balance out the things that are important. And repatriations are hard.
I really feel honored when I work with Jordan and Crystal, but with other tribes, because they're doing the work that we're doing, and it gets really difficult at times when you don't have that support. So like I said, there's so many repatriation stories we could tell. It's, you know, it's saddening that we're still looked at as you know, objects. You know, we're people.
So we've got quite a few questions that have come in from folks who are listening in and watching now. So I'm going to pull a couple of them out of the hat, so to speak. And I think the first couple are about people wanting to know what life was actually like for these children when they were in the boarding schools. And I think we're talking about the historical experience, not today's experience. One question is, do we know stories of children at the boarding schools resisting assimilation, resisting some of the ways in which their culture was taken away from them? And Yufna, maybe we could start with you. You're probably acquainted with some of these.
So one, I got numerous stories also. There's a time we sat in one of the elders' house, and they interviewed him, and they all these elders were sitting there and being recorded, and sitting there listening to all of these stories was disheartening. I was literally sitting in the stairwell crying because, you know, I don't want to cry right now, but it's traumatic to hear that these little kids went off to school, whoever it was, and they went through this traumatic abuse. And it's hard to talk about myself, but to sit there and listen to these old elders talk about how they were treated was really hard. One family story we do have was that Little Chief did have a sister who ran away, and she made it as far back as Red Lake, Minnesota. My grandpa got older and was actually on the business council. She found out he was a council leader, and she wrote him a letter, and he got my dad to drive him all the way to Minnesota. And at that time, we didn't talk about it. Nobody talked about it. As my dad got older, he finally started talking about it. And he said, I thought she had passed away. And my grandpa said, no, she made it. She ran away with 2 other girls, and she didn't want to be at Carlisle. And so she ran away, and a family there adopted her. So right now we were on our way to find this lady, find our relatives. I know she may not be around. Maybe she has descendants, but there's stories like that. We hear atrocious stories where these kids go off to school and they're, you know, physically, sexually abused. And that's that trauma we talk about that's brought back to our reservation. And those types of things is what's passed down negatively to our people. And it becomes a cycle of abuse. And we put Band-Aids, and we use Band-Aids of alcohol and drug use and, you know, lateral oppression to help that. And that part of healing is kind of what I'm hoping people will look at these stories and finally say, okay, we acknowledge those stories, they're real, they're true. What can we do to heal? So there's so many stories. They're hard to talk about and to tell. You know, I don't feel like crying today, but I've heard some really, really horrible things. And, you know, I'm pretty sure there's other stories out there that are just as bad.
And now I'll make it even harder on you, Yufna, because it's a question that's come in from a couple of viewers, and that is they're curious to know, they want to know, how did these children die? What did they die of? And I'm going to add one thing before I ask you to answer that, which is it's not just the kids in that cemetery, of whom there are literally hundreds. It is children who were sent home when they became seriously sick, really as a way of the school avoiding, I suppose, getting higher numbers of deceased children. So many more children that are even buried at Carlisle suffered serious problems and just didn't die there. Would any of you like to talk, though, about what we know about the kinds of things that beset the health of children at schools like Carlisle? I don't have someone to call on particularly. Jordan, you're the go-to.
I think the key thing to remember is that, like, you know, like, I think how I look at it is like these kids, in a sense, had to go through a person to say how they felt about stuff. You know, like they would write letters back to the Indian agents back here, you know? So I think you got to taking that consideration, all things considered, you know, it's like, do these kids trust these people enough to say, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking? You know, I think a lot of them had the loneliness, you know, and at the same time, it's like, if, you know, with abuse, you know, I mean, would they be open enough to talk about that and say, this is what's going on right now, you know, and this is it, you know, and was that properly communicated, you know? So I think I look back at that and I think that's a key thing. And it's like, I feel like sometimes a lot of the kids that they went through, you know, the sad part is that we'll probably never know. But in my estimation, it wasn't good. Like, it wasn't good what transpired all there.
Again, more questions are coming in, and I want to get to some of the key ones if I can. One question is about, we've touched on it a little bit, the way this story and other stories of what might be called the hidden history of that period of time are taught in schools. In other words, if you're going to school on the reservation, do you get the full boarding school story? Is it being incorporated in curricula, both on the reservation and off? And I think this is an opportunity to talk a little bit, as we have, about contemporary federal boarding schools, about the way schooling on, say, the Wind River Reservation has changed in recent years in terms of the public schools and what's available there. Crystal, I made that into a huge sprawling question, but why don't you give it a shot if you can?
Yeah, and for education, like I said, you know, there's a lot of opportunity, you know, especially with technology today, social media, things like that that can get out there and kind of help tell our side of the story, our narrative, you know, to get out there and to inform the public a little bit more, inform ourselves more, to realize that, you know, there's other tribes out there that feel the same way and have experienced the same trauma that we have. And to connect and to support each other. And I think with the boarding schools, the contemporary boarding schools today, what has happened, like it has been flipped, you know, it's now that place for those children on the reservation who maybe don't come from great homes or don't have that good support from home, that, you know, that they are able to go off and try to thrive now. You know, and so it's kind of been flipped a little bit with these boarding schools today, where it allows more opportunities for children to excel and in places where they couldn't have at home. And so there's a lot of places that with modern day boarding school, you know, it's needed now and for our communities to heal. And it makes our people stronger to come back, you know, and to be a good role model for our youth and for our young ones and for the community and to help in a positive way. And I think that that really should have been the intent from the beginning. It should have been the intent from the beginning when these boarding schools happened, to where they were able to allow to have us speak our language, but we could have still learned English too. You know, and it shouldn't have been, you know, as traumatic as it was, because, you know, we've adapted to a lot of stuff, and to have the opportunity, you know, we probably, if they worked with the communities, the tribes that back then, how, you know, and work together and to try to get these children, you know, educated in a positive way, you know, I think things would have been a lot different right now regarding our communities, and you know, how the whole outlook looks living here today. I think it would have been a lot different.
One of the things we found as we were working on this project was that a lot of older people who had attended boarding schools, obviously not in the late 19th century, but in the many years since, as boarding schools evolved in various ways, never talked about it. And we've got a couple of questions that have come in where people are asking people who went to Carlisle and returned, or people who went to boarding schools and returned, what do they say about it? What do they talk about? And I think, Yufna, I want to ask this question in the context of, are people better able now to talk about the boarding school experience? Are they talking about it?
I think kind of going off of what Crystal said at the end there, is that we're slowly pulling ourselves out of this era of denial, maybe in a way, that elders were finally feeling comfortable and being able to voice their own stories and narratives and experiences. What we did before we went to Carlisle was that White Buffalo here on the reservation, they have this great program. It's called Mending Broken Hearts. And Mending Broken Hearts is a trauma-informed program type of thing that you go through the week. And what you do is, we went through it with our elders. I went through it with my workers. I went through it with, I think I took it 5 times within like 2-3 years, but it's really great. And what it did was it helped us heal. It helped us realize, and it helped the elders tell those stories that were so hard to tell. But not only did it help tell that story, it gave them a safe, comfortable, confidential place to tell those stories. And it's hard to tell someone about what you went through when it was so horrific. You don't just want to share that with anybody. So when we went through these trainings and these programs, it was really great to see our community come together and feel like, you know, there's something there that can help us. So White Buffalo program, what they have there is so important to this healing process. And to be able to tell those stories, you need to be in a safe place. You need to feel safe. And you need to be able to let people hear your experience, but at the same time, you need to be able to be respectful to the people that are telling those stories. We've gone through history of telling and not acknowledging what people have gone through, and we're so used to being like, no, that didn't happen this way. This is how we heard it. You know, it's time for our story to be told the way that we need it to be told, and I think this is what the film does.
I had to search for my unmute button there. So we are nearing time. I know we've had a lot of questions and more keep coming in, but I want to get to something that I think it's useful to do. I think a lot of our viewers are not from the reservation. They're off reservation, non-Indian people. And I think they may have been subjected, as many are, to the sort of media portraits of Native American communities that are often, I think, fairly negative. And I guess I would like to let you paint a picture of your people and your community as we come to the close here. Their resiliency, however you want to present it. Chairman Dresser, I think it's appropriate to start with you with this question, if you are willing. Jordan, you may not have heard me there.
Okay, what was that last part?
What I was suggesting was that it might be useful as we come to the end of this to talk a little bit about the way you would portray your community. I think that a lot of times the media presents a fairly simple and not very fair picture of Native American communities, whether they're in cities or on reservations. And I just wanted to give you a chance to paint that picture yourself, your people, your community, the resiliency you see there, or whatever.
I think our community is multi-layered, where I think like Native people always get put in 2 boxes. And it's, especially with the media, it's either like we're so lost, or it's the opposite, and we're just, you know, we're strong and they miss that whole middle spectrum of us, you know. And to me, I just want to tell stories that show all those different layers of who we are as Arapaho people, as Shoshone people, and as this community. And that's a key thing. And sorry, I have to go. I have a meeting.
You're a busy man, I suspect, right now.
But thank you, guys.
Thanks for participating. We really appreciate it.
Yes, bye.
With Jordan gone, then can I extend that question first to Yufna and then to Crystal? Talk a little bit about your community and how you would want to paint that picture.
I think I kind of have to agree with Jordan that our community is very layered. We have a lot of younger people growing up. We have so many of them that are so interested in our culture and that I'm hoping that in the future some of them embrace who we are, and there's ways that they can be taught, and there's ways that they can have this traditional knowledge shared with them, because I don't want to see it be gone. In the future, I want them to be proud. I want them to be resilient and strong. At that time, maybe we'll be elders, and our elders now were strong for us. Our generations before us were strong for us. But we need to keep on our traditions and our culture and our language, which is so important to us. I think our community is really struggling right now, and I think this is something that will help them heal. We can't force people to heal. They kind of have to come to terms with that and want to move on. And I'm hoping this is that start of it. And I'm hoping that, and I hope and I pray that in the future, our people will be equipped and ready to take on the world, to do more than what we're doing right now.
Thank you. And Crystal, would you like to add to this?
Yeah, the way I see our communities too, it's very multi-layered. It's very, just like every other community out there, in America, there's one end of the spectrum where it's really awful, but then there's another side that's really positive. And it's just finding that balance within that, and how are we going to get there, and how are we as a people going to start pushing forward and improving our daily lives, for our loved ones and our family and our community, and what is it going to take, to get there. And we're starting to ask those questions, and people are starting to, work on their families and their own healing, and it's really coming down to that is, these individuals are saying, I'm healing. I realize, what I've been through, in my life when I was younger, it has an effect on me, and I don't want to put it on to my kids, now. And so we need to heal. But then, my concern, and my worry is like, I'm getting up there, to middle age. I'm getting old. And it's scary for me to think like, I'm going to be an elder soon. And do I have that type of knowledge, traditional knowledge to carry on, and with the language and everything. And like I need, time's ticking, and I need to put that responsibility on me as an Arapaho person to learn that and to carry that on, because man, in 20, 30 years, we're it, me, Yufna, and Jordan, we're up there. And how are we gonna, direct our people? And what kind of guidance and advice are we gonna give our people at that time? And how are we gonna raise our kids to be those leaders that we want them to be, to have that, to be strong in both worlds, to be a very traditional, follow strong Arapaho person, but then to also be very highly educated and to know the mainstream society and how to succeed in that too, and how are we going to do that, and how are we going to direct our youth to do that, and to motivate them to get to that point, and how are we going to motivate ourselves to to be very very good elders. I don't know how to put it, but anyway, and so there's all this whole dynamics that come into play when you think about it, and how are we going to move everybody forward, and if everybody's going to come together, because right now, with everything that's going on, it's really hard when you have to look at connections, and we can't really have that connecting, on a personal face-to-face level. And how are we, doing this? And like just with this Zoom stuff, and we have to take advantage of that now and start utilizing that, because, right now we can't be face-to-face with our elders. We have to protect them. And so it's like really difficult. But we've adapted this whole time with other pandemics, and we've adapted with assimilation, with genocide, and we've always, adapted. And so I feel like we're going to adapt now, and we're going to do what's best for our people and what's best for our families and our loved ones and our communities. And I really have faith in that we're a strong people and resilient people. We'll always be that way. So thank you.
Thank you. I think we have, again, many questions have come in. Another one, though, that might be worth addressing right here at the end would be people asking who are non-native, not members of the Wind River community even, what can people do? How can they contribute or in any way help in this healing process that you've been talking about? Yufna, could you address that? And by the way, my screen is shifting around because I'm trying to avoid the glare. This is part of life in the Zoom world. Please, Yufna.
Oh, so I think one way that allies can help tribes, not just our tribe, there's other tribes out there that do need help, is to just, Jordan's gone right now, but one of the things is to contact the tribe, say, hey, what's something we can do? What is something that, you guys may need? There's programs, there's something that we can help with. There's a lack of resources here on the tribe, with the tribe, when we talk about how do we share this knowledge? What do we do? How do we do this? So kind of what Crystal was saying was, how do we share this knowledge, and what do we need to implement to keep ourselves going, to make ourselves better, to be healed? And I think as a non-native, and my words to a non-native would be to seek out a tribe, ask them, find programs, find various people to contact and say, how can we help? I'm pretty sure White Buffalo Recovery here needs some way, somehow. They're always trying to help everybody. I'm pretty sure they need donations, or the tribe needs a donation or something of that sort. Not specifically knowing myself what they need, contact them, ask them. That's the best way. TIPO is the same way. Contact them, ask them, what are some things we can do to help? Education is huge, brochures, websites, there's so much that could be done for tribes. Crystal, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, and I agree to just go off of what Yufna said is, just contact and the tribes and get your network going and trying to figure out, what that community needs, what that program needs, maybe they need a little bit of support, that we can't, get directly from grants or something, or there's outside, matching fund or whatever, and things like that, is really important to have that support. And especially with our office, and we're looking at getting a cultural center, and how are we going to develop that? What is it going to look like? If there's people out there that could help us, design it or get to that point and offer their services to where we build a very, very great cultural center, a museum, or in a repository that, that then we are able to do our job, so much better, and it will help our community, it will help our children learn about, our artifacts or our sacred objects, and just learn who they are. But then it's also a way for the public to come and learn who we are, and we're actually controlling that, and we get to tell them exactly who we are. And to have that support is huge. It would be huge, and it's really needed to come together and just heal together, basically. So.
Great. Well, listen, I want to say a big, big thank you to Crystal Seabearing and to Yufna Soldier Wolf, and to the now absent chairman of the Arapaho Business Council, Chairman Jordan Dresser. He's a very busy man. I think we were lucky to get him for the time that we had him here on the panel. But this means a lot to him. This is an important thing. And I know a lot of you have been asking in some of the inquiries we've had about when will the film be released. A couple of things. In the age of COVID, we are dealing with a pandemic like everybody else, but we're very close to finishing our job of editing the story. Distribution, though, is a question mark, and we have to wait and see. All we can say is that it is our pledge that it will first be released on the Wind River Reservation. That's where any premiere is going to be first. That's the community that we are most concerned with getting it to first. And then we will see, and we are seeing about the possibility of distribution nationally and in other areas through other media. I need to thank again everybody. I need, of course, to thank the panel, but I also want to thank the Wyoming Humanities Council for what they've done, and for the Jackson Hole Center for the Arts for hosting the event. It's been great for us, and you guys are just wonderful the way you can tell these stories and help people get an idea of this. You can find out the film's progress, where we are with it, when it's going to come out at homefromschoolfilm.com. That's all one word, homefromschoolfilm.com, or on the Facebook page, of calderaproductions.com. I want to do one thing at the end here. I couldn't do it earlier because I didn't want Yufna to start crying in the middle of this, but this is a very important thing to say. We had 3 tribal elders who were extremely important to the story. I have trouble talking about this too, and we have lost them in the course of putting the film together and working on this. So in memory of, but never dying memory of, Betty Friday, Crawford White, and Mark Soldier Wolf. They are the elders who have made this story happen, and we are forever grateful for their help. Again, thank you all for attending this, and thanks to our panelists again. And I think we're done, unless Sean or someone wants to come on at the end here. You're muted, Sean.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Chairman Dresser, Yufna, Crystal. Thank you for your stories that you've shared. Thank you for sharing this experience with us, and we look forward to the final product. Some of the themes that I think are worth revisiting are those of accountability and healing. And I think Chairman Dresser put it so well. This is an opportunity to open a door for closure. And I think it's a beautiful thing to think through. So thank you all so much. And thank you to our audience today. This was a wonderful connection to the past and to a culture and to a future. So thank you.